Good morning, friends. So you watched a video on the color wheel and the placement of all the colors on the color wheel. We are going to create a color wheel together today. You also saw several examples of creative color wheels. We're going to do that too. I'm going to walk you through the process for creating it. Today we're focusing just on the primary and secondary colors in the color wheel. So 6 specific colors need to be in this color wheel: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. The first thing I want you to do with your paper when you get it is we're going to fold it. We're going to take this top right corner, fold it down along the side of our paper, almost like you would fold it if you were going to make a fortune teller. Fold it in half. That creates a nice diagonal line from this top corner, the left corner of the paper. I'm going to cut this off because I do not need this extra paper right here. Move that to the side. I'm going to fold this triangle in half. Like that. I'm going to fold it in half one more time. And I'm doing this to create some guidelines, some reference points for me when I draw. That means I don't have to draw as many lines when we get to that line project. I'm also doing it because I'm going to cut this into a circle. So with my pencil, I'm going to draw a very, very slight curved line. Now we've talked about lines, you drew lines. So this is where those lines come into play. Actually, that's not quite the angle I wanted at. This is one of those things that you can always fix once you open it up if it's not exactly rounded. But for now, we'll cut that. See how we did cutting that circle. It's almost like starting a snowflake, but not quite. I think it turned out okay. All right. Yeah, it's not perfect, but that's okay. If once you get it open, you want to trim it around a little bit just to round it out even more, you can. So because I folded my paper, I have created 8 different triangles. I only need to create 6. We're going to create a cityscape. I only need to draw 6 buildings. So I'm going to draw some of my buildings through more than one shape. So the first thing I'm going to do right here is the center of my paper. This is where all of my buildings are going to look like they're going to. So when we draw this picture, it's going to look like we're standing on the street looking straight up, and we see the tops of all the buildings, and it looks like they are reaching towards the sky. So here at the center, that will be the sky. So I'm going to start one building right here, and I'm going to just start right on that fold line, draw that line down. Now, I would say when you're drawing, you definitely want to make sure that you're whisper drawing so you can see the lines. I'm going to draw my lines a little bit darker, just so it's easier for you all to see them. So as you can see, if I follow those fold lines, my building is going to get bigger at the bottom, and it's going to be smaller at the top. I'm also going to create a side for this building to make it look 3-dimensional. When I create that side, I draw a line that is diagonal, and it goes slightly down towards the outside edge of my paper. My windows in my building are going to be smaller at the top, wider at the bottom. Again, these buildings are growing up, so they're going to be fix that line. They're going to get bigger. Or they're going to get smaller the farther away they go, and they're going to get bigger the closer they get to the edge. You don't have to put windows in all of the buildings, but you can. And you can have fun with the types of windows that you put in the buildings as well. All right, so there's one building. If you wanted to make this look a little bit like downtown Knoxville, you could do the Cityscape. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do that. We're gonna play with that. Now, this, I'm not gonna use the whole shape of this triangle for, but I am gonna follow that line. And even doing that, it looks funny, doesn't it? That's okay. It's allowed to. So I fixed my circle a little bit here. That way I can make this look a little bit like Knoxville. But I'm gonna throw a few other things in here that are just gonna, and I'm gonna fix that line. That are gonna kind of throw it off, so you'll be like, that's not Knoxville, Miss Armstrong. I moved here from Roanoke, and we have a building in downtown Roanoke that has a huge coffee cup and coffee pot on top of it. So I'm going to draw that just so you can kind of see how you can have fun with building, with drawing your buildings here. This is kind of looking like a giant pumpkin. So this right here, since it's a Cityscape, if I want to remain true to how the Cityscape looks as possible, this is going to end up being my yellow in my color wheel. All right, so this building, this is going to be fun. I'm going to draw a little bit smaller than the other two. So that I can add the giant coffee cup and coffee pot on it. Okay, so I got cut off earlier. I ran out of space, so I had to clear out some space on my phone. I'm going to draw my last building here with you. As you can see, I started drawing a building and put a little point on top, and it kind of reminded me of a crayon, so I turned that into a crayon building. That was pretty fun. I also drew a building next to it and put a funky little roof on it, and that I decided that would be a great bakery building, so I drew a cupcake on the window. I have one last building to draw. As you can see, the first building I drew, I erased and moved over slightly and added a little side building to it that looks like it's got a little shop in it, and I'm going to just add one final building here. Once I get that final building done, I'm going to add a couple of details in here just for fun, and I'll come back on and show you those as well. Okay, so I have my 6 buildings in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have a little bit of space here and here, so I'm going to just throw in a really simple tree that it's not very big. It's just going to fill in a little bit. Again, it's wider at the bottom or the outside edge of my paper than it is at the center. And these are actually going to be tall, slender, kind of make them birch trees. Birch trees are good trees to have in the city because they grow up really straight and tall. don't have huge canopies, so to have them along the streets is a great thing. It doesn't need to be much taller than that, because that would be taller than the Sunisphere, and obviously our birch trees aren't quite that tall. So I'm going to actually restart that, because the top of it would be actually closer to this height right here, and that's still a ridiculously tall birch tree for a city. So put a little bit more up near the top canopy of it. It's going to probably end up turning not into a birch tree, just because I don't like having a weird canopy like that. So I'll probably turn it into something else if I don't like the way it looks. No big deal. Make it work for me. And I'm going to fill in this spot right here with a tree. Actually, maybe with two. So this one is just very... The leaves are starting to fall off, so we just really have the skeletons and bones of the trees that are visible, which is most definitely okay. Those kind of trees, I think, are very beautiful in their winter slumber. There's something just amazingly cool about them. All right, so we just put those in there to give a little extra detail just for fun. I'm going to redo this bad boy here because I don't like the way he looks. So you can see even Miss Armstrong makes mistakes and refixes them and doesn't have things turn out the way she might necessarily want them to turn out, and that is most definitely okay. Can't always get things right the first time, and sometimes what we originally planned doesn't always work out, and that is definitely okay. We may end up with something even better as a result. So here is my cityscape that is done in a radial design. A radial design is a circular design, so it's balanced all the way around, and we are going to color this in so that it is our color wheel. We're using 6 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. We know for sure this one is going to be yellow. I'm going to just very lightly mark which building is going to be which color. So if this is yellow, this one is probably going to be orange, which will make my crayon building red, which will make my cupcake building blue. I'm sorry, violet, or purple. I'll put a P there so it's less confusing. Purple, because red and blue make purple. And my glass building, oh, that's appropriate, blue. So this is a building made out of glass completely. Well, I tried to make it look like it was made out of glass. And this building is made green. All right, so that works because yellow and blue make green. Blue and red make purple. Red and yellow make orange. So I have all my colors exactly where they need to be. If when you get to this point you're not exactly sure what colors go where, go back to look at the video. Go back and look at some of the color wheels. You will be able to use those as resources. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment, collect the materials that I need for this next step, and then I'm going to walk you through part of that and then let you watch the rest of it on fast forward. Okay, so I have my materials that I need. You're going to need an eraser. I have a black Sharpie and a black ink pen. I am going to actually go over these lines with my Sharpie pen. The reason I'm going to use my Sharpie pen is because it's a thinner tip, and I have some thinner lines that I want to be able to hit. That Sharpie is just going to be a little bit too thick, but you can use a Sharpie if you want to, if you have a fine tip one. If you do use a Sharpie, you want to make sure that you have a piece of paper underneath this paper, because the Sharpie will bleed through. Unless your paper is really thick, when you're using Sharpie, always put a layer of paper underneath so that it catches any of the bleeding that might take place. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my Sharpie to trace all of my pencil lines. So I'm not outlining. If I was outlining, I would be going around. I'm actually tracing over top of every single pencil line that I've drawn here before I start adding my color with my colored pencils. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the tracing quickly so you can watch that. And then we'll get to the coloring point. All right, so now that I have all of my lines traced, and you can see, looking closely at this, that there are some places where I actually switched and changed some of my lines. Here you can see it in this building. You can also see it here in this building. So what I need to do now is I need to clean up all of those pencil lines that are visible. And the reason I'm cleaning those up is because when I start adding my color with my colored pencils will grab any graphite that is left on the paper and pull it into the color, and it'll make that color look really dirty and dull. And we want to make sure we have as clean a surface as possible on our paper for applying color. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all these lines erased. And if you notice, I am starting from the center and I am erasing to the outside edge of my paper. And that's just because that's gonna keep me from, if I pull towards me, possibly pulling the edge of that paper in and wrinkling it up, which I have done. So I really focus on trying to make sure that I maintain that outward push with the eraser so that I don't end up wrinkling the edges of my paper, because I want my work to be as neat and tidy as possible. So that if somebody sees it and wants it and says, hey, how much would you charge to make me one of those? I can say, I'll sell you this one right now. This is how much you have to pay for it. And you've made yourself a little bit of pocket change. Or if somebody sees it and says, hey, we would like to put that in our gallery on display so more people can see your art style, because we really like your style of art, and more people should know about you. You can say, oh, okay, well, it's ready. All you need to do is take it and hang it up. All right, so, see what I mean there? That's why I definitely push outwards, because even there, pushing outwards, I actually pulled that in a little bit and wrinkled the paper. If that happens, there is actually a way to straighten up the paper. There are always tricks and tips. You actually can use an iron to flatten out wrinkles from your paper. So, I'm almost done. Now, this first building that I drew, I was drawing it dark so you could see the pencil lines really well. So there are definitely going to be some shadows of those lines left over. I'm not going to be able to completely get rid of all of those pencil lines. So now that I have everything erased, I'm going to go ahead and clean all of the eraser the eraser bits off of my workspace, because I want to have a nice clean workspace. I don't want any of them stuck underneath my paper when I start coloring. All right, so what I want you to be aware of with coloring, you are using colored pencils. Colored pencils. What are we using? We're using colored pencils. So what I want you to be aware of when we are coloring, and I'm going to go ahead and use orange because I think that's going to be the easiest one for you to see right now, and it's right here, right by the yellow. Anything that this whole building is going to be orange. The closer the building is to the center of your paper, the darker it needs to be. So this is going to be shadowed. It's farther away from you, so there's going to be more shadows here. The closer it is to the outside edge of the paper, the lighter it's going to be. So we're going to practice shading. We're going to be coloring this in. We're also going to be practicing shading. Now, if you look at the way I'm coloring, I am not being sloppy at all. I'm being very precise with where I put my color, and I'm making sure that I fill in that space completely. I don't want any white spaces. I want it to be nice and smooth. Smooth so that if you were to run your finger along it, it would almost feel like velvet. And that is possible. So this is what we're going to do with every single color. This spot right here, whatever part of the building is closest to the center of your paper, is going to be darkest. So my teapot here that is pouring coffee into my coffee cup, at a funny angle because why not? And here we thought that was steam, is going to be darker than the top part of my building here. So I start by applying quite a bit of pressure. And as I start to move away from the center of my paper, I ease up on that pressure. And you can see that. You can also hear it if you listen carefully. Here you can see it a lot. It's darker at the top of the teapot, it's lighter at the bottom. I'm going to move that darkness down a little bit more. I want that shadow, that teapot to be a little bit more in the shadow, a little bit darker, so that it's even with the cup as far as shading goes. And as you can see, I work on these two before I even get down here to the building. Again, I am filling in each area completely. I am not rushing through this part because I want to make sure that I get that shading down really well. I want it to be obvious that it's darker here. Fill that in just a little bit more, and it gets lighter the closer we get to the outside of our paper. Right there. All right. So here we go. You'll really be able to see it here. I'm not gonna color in my windows right now. They are gonna be orange, but I'm gonna save them to the end because they are going to be they're gonna be my lightest shade of orange simply because they're windows. But again, I am going ahead and I'm coloring this in. This is pretty dark. It's about the same as here, and I'm getting lighter as I go down. Now I try to keep my pressure even so that when I come over here, it remains the same and it looks very, very fluid. It doesn't look like I've done it in different sections. If I need to get lighter and then go back in and get darker to make it all even, that's what I recommend doing. Start off lighter if you need to, and then you can go in and add more colored pencils. You can't take color away. Colored pencils, even if you have colored pencils that say they're erasable, are not in fact truly erasable. There will always be some color left on your paper because colored pencils are created with a wax and a paint die. So yes, you have that color. Yes, it says it's erasable, but really all it does is it takes a couple of layers of that colored pencil off. It doesn't ever truly erase all of the color. So I always try to start light and then get darker. So as you can see up here, it's pretty dark. I need to bring some of that shadow down a little bit more, which I can do because I did go lighter here. Bring this down a little bit more here. And in here. And now, because I can see these inside edges of my windows, I'm gonna go ahead and make those dark because it's gonna just make it pop out a little bit more. It's gonna look really good. Just like that. Like that. And then I'm going to color in very lightly these windows. So these windows are going to be as light, if not lighter, than the bottom of my building down here by the outside edge of my paper. But that's going to create my orange section of my color wheel. So from here, I can go in either direction. I can move to the left and color in my crayon building, which I marked as red, so that would be red. By the way, if you need to, I would recommend remarking them very lightly just by using the actual color of the colored pencil if you need to do that. I know that my Sonosphere is my yellow, so that's kind of my my go-to reference point. Since I know that's going to be yellow and that's the building to the right of orange, then I know that the building to the left is going to be red because red and yellow make orange. Let me get this side of the building. This side of the building I'm going to make a little bit darker overall because it is a side building. So it's going to be a little bit more shadowed than the front would be. Kind of like this up here, which is farther away from the eye as well. And I'm gonna make the sign a little bit lighter just so it stands out and just is really easy to see. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through the coloring so you can watch me color and see how I do that. You do need to be aware of the shading. It needs to be darker on the inside of the circle, lighter at the outside of the circle. You need to color it in completely. It needs to be very neat. I shouldn't see any white spaces. You will see how I do the background. I'm gonna do a mixture probably of purple and blue, which is known as indigo in the color wheel, just to create that sky look. But you'll see, I'll probably stop and talk to you a little bit about that when we get to that point. For now, I'm going to have some coloring happening so you can watch that happen. And then I'll stop and talk to you about the background. Okay guys, so I have all of my buildings colored in and I have all of the colors for my color wheel represented here. I have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Did a little yellow green here on the side. This little bump out for the green because if we mix yellow and green together, we get yellow green. So if you have any extra little additions that you've put onto your little buildings, and you have the ability to do that. So for example, if I really wanted to, I probably could have done this tree a yellow orange, but I wanted it to be a shadow. I wanted it to be in the shadows, so I did it with a black and a brown crayon. Same here, if I wanted to make these trees truly a part of the color wheel, I also could have done a red-orange here because they are between red and orange. So if you have little details that you've added between them, between some of the buildings that you want to make a part of the color wheel, if I had something here between red and purple, it would be red-purple or red-violet. If I had something here between blue and purple, it would be blue-violet. You may have those colors in your colored pencil box. If you don't, you would take those two colors and you would mix them together, and you would start off very lightly and build your way up to make them darker. But you always start off lightly when you're mixing colors. If you start off too dark, you're not going to be able to mix another color into it well. So my background here, I'm not going to leave it white. I do want to fill it in. And I did mention that I was going to do a indigo or a blue-violet. That is not a color that I have in my colored pencil box. So I am in fact going to use my violet, my purple crayon, and my blue crayon to create a blue-violet. And the reason I'm using these two is because I do want my background to be a little bit darker, but I don't want it to be a dark black. I want these colors to pop out really well, but I don't want to completely suck the life out of them. And sometimes if we use too much black, it will suck the life out of it. I also don't want to lose these trees down here that I colored in with black and brown. So this will suffice. And I like using blue-violet, blues and violets when I do skies, especially if I'm doing outer space. In the center here is going to be my darkest point, but right now I'm just going to work on getting color down. I'm not going to make it too dark, too heavy, because I need to add the violet to this. So this is just my blue. I'm just laying down my color here quickly. When you are coloring, I hope that you noted that when I color, I actually go back and forth over a spot a couple of times because I don't want it to be obvious what direction my colored pencil strokes were going in. I want it to be very smooth. I don't want you to be able to see the strokes that I made with my colored pencil. So there were multiple times in the video where if you look closely, you would have seen me go over some of the areas that I colored in the opposite direction just to smooth everything out so everything laid down nice and flat and even, and you couldn't actually see any distinguishing marks that showed you which direction I was coloring in, if I was coloring up and down or side to side or diagonally or in a circle. I like to smooth everything out as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in over here a little bit more. I think it's going to be a little bit less coloring, and then I can go in with the violet and show you how I overlap that real quick before I go ahead and put this into fast forward mode, so you don't have to sit for the whole amount of time that I am sitting creating this. You can watch it at a quicker pace. So here is one layer of blue just in this section here. I try to do all one color at once so that I can keep my pressure even, so I don't have some areas where it's darker and heavier than other areas. So I'm going to start in the middle because the middle is definitely going to be where I use the most pressure because that is the darkest point in our whole picture. All of our buildings where they are closest to the middle of the picture are darkest. So as you can see, I'm going right over top of that blue with that violet. And it does create a very nice mix of the blue and the violet together. Now, I'm going to do multiple layers of this. So once I get one layer of blue and then one layer of violet down, I'm gonna go back over it with another layer of blue and another layer of violet. It's just gonna deepen that color, and it's going to really make that picture stand out overall. So I'm gonna fast forward everything that I do from this point on so you can watch the process, but you don't have to watch it in real time. You can watch it on a slightly quicker scale. All right, so as you can see, the center of my color wheel is darker than the outside, and that is in keeping with what we've been doing. We've been creating the darker areas near the center and getting lighter as we go out. So this is an evening sky, but I did want it to be darker here than at the outside edges, so it's an early evening sky. It's just turning to dusk, or right after dusk has come. Definitely will probably play around with that sky a little bit more. However, a few things I wanted to say. When you are doing your sky and you are coloring around these other buildings, be very careful. There was one spot right here where I was coloring a little too fast, and I got a little bit in the side of my little sonosphere. Not too much that it's obvious, but I know it, so it's going to stand out to me. Now you know it, so you'll probably notice it as well. However, if I hadn't said anything, you probably wouldn't have picked up on it. Most important thing I want you to do is have fun with this. Be creative. Your buildings can look however you want them to look. We're just having a little bit of fun. I mean, I made a crayon building. So 6 buildings, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Those are the 6 colors I'm looking for. They need to be placed correctly. So red, yellow, and blue are primary colors, and you should have a secondary color in between each of them. The secondary color goes in between the 2 colors that you mix to create it. So red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue make green, red and blue make violet. That is the correct placement on the color wheel. I'm looking for these 6 colors. I'm looking for the correct placement in your buildings on your color wheel. I am looking for creativity in the buildings that you draw. And I am looking for how well you're coloring in. I want to see the shading, dark to light, and neatness. It needs to be very neatly colored in, very neatly drawn, very neatly presented. Take a picture of it when you're done and turn it into me. I will see you guys later. Bye.